With 20 days until Election Day, the Trump vision for his second term is being spelled out in very clear terms. You might remember that a couple days ago we walked through comments Trump made over the weekend about using the National Guard or the military to go after his political opponents. Here's what he said.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
Now, Trump went on to name drop Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California, who's running for the Senate, labeling Schiff one of those so-called enemies from within. Now, when we presented all of this to Virginia's Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin on Monday, he refused to accept that Trump said what he said. But I'm talking about Donald Trump saying that he wants to use the National Guard and the military to go after the left. That's what he's saying.
I don't believe that's what he's saying. But listen, you and I are going to argue about that. But I would suggest if you would also.
I played the quote and I read it to you.
If you would also balance
you can wish that he weren't saying that, but that's what he's saying.
Jake, all the time people are taking little snippets of content and turning it into a big narrative.
It was not taken out of context, as often happens when Mr. Trump makes claims that seem to push the boundaries of traditional discourse, and obviously using the military to go after your political rivals qualifies. Mr. Trump continued to make it clear that the rather creative interpretations from Governor Youngkin and other Trump surrogates of his remarks were incorrect, and then, in fact, he was saying exactly what he seemed to be saying. Here's what Trump said today when asked about his enemy from within remarks during a town hall on Fox.
They're very, very different. And it is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're dangerous for our country. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick and they're so evil.
This is obviously unprecedented in American life, mainstream American life anyway, for a nominee to be talking about using the military against their political opponents, domestic political opponents, and obviously doing so would significantly change the nature of the United States. Recall that someone who had already heard horrific and baseless conspiracy theories about Democrats and the Pelosi's actually broke into the home of the Pelosi's and attacked Paul Pelosi with a hammer, fracturing his skull, leaving him with severe problems. And there's more. Trump not only says that the Nancy Pelosi's and the Adam Schiffs should be, quote, handled, he also said this about what a second Trump term would mean for the free press.
The news is really fake. That's the one we really have to straighten. We have to straighten out our press because we have a corrupt press.
Now, I don't know what it means that the press needs to be straightened out. I do know that the only media organizations that Trump regularly praises and appears on for interviews are ones that seem to support him. And by the way, ones that in the past have parroted right-wing lies, especially about the 2020 election, which incidentally ended with both Fox and the far-right conspiracy website Gateway Pundit settling defamation lawsuits because they were telling lies. Trump's media reform push does not seem to be about ushering in better journalistic standards and practices, which I would applaud, better journalistic standards and practices. This push does seem more focused on a news media that would avoid scrutiny and criticism of him. And on that subject of media regulation, we should also look to recent comments from Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance. I want you to pay attention to what Vance said just moments ago after he refused to say that President Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
I think there are serious problems in 2020. So did Donald Trump lose the election? Not by the words that I would use. Okay? So look, we could, but look, I really couldn't care less if you agree or disagree with me on this issue. And here's the thing that I focus on, because what the media will do, they'll focus on the court cases or they'll focus on some crazy conspiracy theory. What verifiably I know happened is that in 2020, large technology companies censored Americans from talking about things like the Hunter Biden laptop story, and that had a major consequence on the election.
Now, that seems to be a reference to the factual matter that both Facebook and Twitter temporarily suppressed an October 2020 New York Post story regarding Hunter Biden's laptop. And to be clear, we do not support that kind of suppression of information here at The Lead. But Senator Vance also cited the laptop story when asked by the New York Times if he had been in the Senate at the time, would have voted to certify the 2020 election.
I would have voted against certification because of the concern that I just raised. I think that when you have technology companies...
The answer is no.
When you have technology companies censoring Americans at a mass scale in a way that, again, independent studies have suggested affect the vote, I think that it's right to protest against that, to criticize that, and that's a totally reasonable thing.
So I just have to say this is a pretty slippery slope. Unfair media or unfair social media coverage is a completely subjective standard. And the idea that that is reason enough to vote to throw away the votes of millions of Americans, I mean, let's extrapolate that for 1 second, what that reasoning would mean. I mean, right now Twitter, or X, is run by Elon Musk, who's very much on record supporting the election of Donald Trump. He gave nearly $75 million to a pro-Trump super PAC, and he tweets in favor of Trump all the time, which is his right. And we should note, Musk's changes to Twitter have, by many studies, created an explosion of false information, much of which, by the way, is amplified by Musk himself and algorithmically force-fed to millions of users. So going back to J.D. Vance's logic on election certification, if Vice President Kamala Harris loses to Trump, which could happen, would Vance be okay with her refusing to certify the election on January 6th as Vice President, as Mike Pence was in that position 4 years ago, simply because she doesn't like how X handled her candidacy, or refused to allow the dossier hacked by Iranian hackers into J.D. Vance that was stolen from the Trump team? Like, that has been suppressed on X, and I'm not saying it shouldn't have been, but that's, you know, a subjective determination. She could say it wasn't fair. So obviously, if she were to do so, that would be checks Constitution, not how this should ever work, which is frankly of a piece with using the military to go after your political rivals, or the government, quote, unquote, straightening out the free press. And here we are.